Hi, boys and girls. Miss Kathy here from Shaler North Hills Library for another episode of Greek Myth Mania. And this week we are featuring Prometheus, Pandora, and Helios, the sun god. Okay, we are going to be reading in the Bellairs book. If you want to follow along online, I posted the site for you. And we are going to begin on page 70 with a picture that looks like that. Get up here so you can see. Minor gods and goddesses also lived on Olympus besides the 12 great ones. The most powerful of them were the goddesses of destiny, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. They were the three fates, and they decided how long a mortal would live and how long the rule of the gods should last. When a mortal was born, Clotho spun the thread of life. Lachesis measured a certain length, and Atropos cut the thread at the end of life. They knew the past and the future, and even Zeus had no power to sway their decisions. Their sister, Nemesis, saw to it that all evil and all good on earth were justly repaid, and all mortals feared her. Man's creator and his best friend was the Titan Prometheus. Zeus had given Prometheus and his brother, Epimetheus, the task of repopulating the earth after all living creatures had perished in the early battles of the gods. He gave the two brothers great measures of gifts to bestow upon their creations, and they went down to earth and began to make men and beasts out of river clay. Wise Prometheus modeled men with great care in the shape of the gods. Epimetheus rapidly made all kinds of animals, and without any foresight, he lavished the good gifts upon them. When Prometheus had finished shaping man, he found that there were few of the good gifts left. Animals could run faster, see, smell, and hear better, and had much more endurance. Besides, they were kept snug in their warm coats of fur, while men shivered in the cold nights. Prometheus was sorry for mankind, and he went to Zeus and asked him if he might have some of the sacred fire for his poor creations. But Zeus said no. Fire belonged to the gods alone. Prometheus could not bear to see his people suffer, and he decided to steal fire, though he knew that Zeus would punish him severely. He went up to Olympus, took a glowing ember from the sacred hearth, and hid it in a hollow stalk of fennel. He carried it down to earth, gave it to mankind, and told them never to let the light from Olympus die out. No longer did men shiver in the cold of the night, and the beasts feared the light of the fire and did not dare to attack them. A strange thing happened. As men lifted their eyes from the ground and watched the smoke from their fires spiraling upward, their thoughts rose with it up to the heavens. They began to wonder and think, and were no longer earthbound clods. They built temples to honor the gods, and wanting to share what they had with them, they burned the best pieces of meat on their altars. Zeus was furious when he first saw the fires flickering on earth, but he was appeased when the savory scent of roast meat reached his nostrils. All the gods loved the smell of the burnt offerings. It spiced their daily food of ambrosia and nectar. But Prometheus knew how hard men worked to make their living, and thought it a pity that they burned up the best parts of their food. He told them to butcher an ox and divide the meat in 2 equal heaps. In one were the chops and roasts, hidden under sinews and bones. In the other were scraps and entrails covered with snow-white fat. Prometheus then invited Zeus to come down to earth and choose for himself which part he wanted for his burnt offerings. Zeus, of course, chose the best-looking heap, But when he discovered that he had been tricked, he grew very angry. Not only had Prometheus stolen the sacred fire and given it to men, he had also taught them to cheat the gods. He resolved to punish both Prometheus and his creations. Cast in unbreakable irons, Prometheus was chained to the top of the Caucasus Mountains. Every day an eagle swooped out of the sky and ate his liver. At night his immortal liver grew anew, but every day the eagle returned and he had to suffer again. Thus was Prometheus punished. But Zeus found a more subtle way to punish the mortals. He sent to earth a beautiful but silly woman. Her name was Pandora. Pandora was modeled by Hephaestus in the likeness of Aphrodite. Remember her? She was the goddess of love, the beautiful goddess of love. He carved her out of a block of white marble, made her lips of red rubies and her eyes of sparkling sapphires. Athena breathed life into her and dressed her in elegant garments. Aphrodite decked her with jewels and fixed her with red mouth and a winning smile. Into the mind of this beautiful creature Zeus put insatiable curiosity. It means she could not get enough answers to her questions. And then he gave her a sealed jar and warned her never to open it. Hermes brought Pandora down to earth and offered her in marriage to Epimetheus, who lived among the mortals. Epimetheus had been warned by Prometheus never to accept a gift from Zeus, but he could not resist the beautiful woman. Thus Pandora came to live among mortals, and men came from near and far to stand awestruck by her wondrous beauty. But Pandora was not perfectly happy, for she did not know what was in the jar that Zeus had given her. It was not long before her curiosity got the better of her, and she had to take a quick peek. The moment she opened the lid, out swarmed a horde of miseries: greed, vanity, slander, envy, and all the evils that until then had been unknown to mankind. Horrified at what she'd done, Pandora clapped the lid on it just in time to keep Hope from flying away, too. Zeus had put Hope at the bottom of the jar, and the unleashed miseries would quickly have put an end to it. They stung and bit the mortals as Zeus had planned, but their sufferings made them wicked instead of good, as Zeus had hoped. They lied, they stole, and they killed each other and became so evil that Zeus, in disgust, decided to drown them in a flood. But there was one man on earth who had not turned evil, the son of Prometheus. We won't get into his story today, but there's all the evils being released. Deceit, which is when you lie to people. Scolding. Despair, when you give up hope. Accusation, when you accuse somebody of doing something. Envy, when you're jealous of people. Telling lies. Distrusting people. Getting old. Scheming and conniving. Drudgery. Gossiping. All the things that she left out of the box. They called it a jar in here, but most places call it a box. Okay, then we're going to skip back a little bit to page 82 in the booklet and do Helios. Helios, the sun god, mounted his glowing chariot and drove out in great splendor as soon as Eos threw open the gates of his golden palace in the east. His radiance lit up the wide expanse of sky. So bright was he that only the gods could look straight at him without being blinded. Brilliant rays encircled his head, and his chariot glowed like fire. With a strong hand, Helios guided his 4 fiery steeds up the vault of the heavens. The path was steep and narrow, and the horses were wild, but Helios held them well on their course. At high noon he stopped at the top of the sky and looked around, and nothing could escape his piercing gaze. Again he drove on, and now he gave free rein to his steeds. Far to the west they could see his glittering evening palace, and eager to reach their stables they raced on the downhill course faster and faster. They passed a great herd of white cows hurrying homeward to Helios's palace, and met a large flock of sheep going out to pasture in the sky. For Helios owned a snow-white cow for each day of the year, and a woolly sheep for each night. Maybe that's why we count sheep at night, huh? The shadows grew long and dusk settled over the world when Helios and his foaming team arrived. His 5 daughters, the Heliades, awaited them. They unharnessed the tired horses and let them plunge into the ocean for a cooling bath. Then the horses rested in their stables, and Helios talked with his daughters and told them all he had seen that day. In the dark of the night, he boarded a vessel of gold with his team and sailed around the world, back to his palace in the east. The way was far shorter by sea than by air, so he had time to stay for a while in his morning palace too, before he set out on another day's journey. Helios had a son named Phaethon. He was a mortal and very proud of his radiant father. One morning, as Helios was about to set off on his daily journey across the sky, Phaethon came to him and begged him to grant his dearest wish. Helios, who was very fond of his handsome son, rashly swore by the river Styx to give him any wish he might have. Remember, the river Styx was the one that went down into Hades, over which no person could ever cross back over because it was the land of the dead. But when he heard Phaethon's wish, he sorely regretted his oath. He tried in vain to make his son change his mind, for what Phaethon wanted was to drive the sun chariot for one day, and Helios knew that no one but he himself could handle the spirited steeds. Phaethon was determined to have his wish, and Helios had to give in. Sadly, he put his golden rays on his son's head and rubbed divine ointment on his skin so he could withstand the searing heat of the chariot. He barely had time to warn him to stay well in the middle of the heavenly path when the gates of the palace were thrown open and the rearing horses were brought forth. Phaethon leaped into the chariot, grasped the reins, and the horses rushed out. At first all went well, and Phaethon stood proudly in the glowing chariot. But the fiery steeds soon felt that unskilled hands were holding the reins. They veered off the heavenly path and brushed by the dangerous constellations that lurked on both sides of it. The animals of the zodiac were enraged. The bull charged, the lion growled, the scorpion lashed out with its poisonous tail. The horses shied, and Phaethon was thrown halfway out of the chariot. Far down below he saw the earth, and he grew so dizzy that he dropped the reins. Without a firm hand to guide them, the horses bolted. They raced so close to the earth that the ground cracked from the heat of the chariot, and rivers and lakes dried up. Then upward they sped so high that the earth froze and turned to ice. Zeus stood on Olympus and shook his head. He had to stop the careening chariot to save the earth from destruction, and he threw a thunderbolt at it. In a shower of sparks the chariot flew apart, and Phaethon plunged into the river Po. On the river banks his sisters mourned so long that Zeus took pity on them and changed them into poplar trees, and their tears into drops of golden amber. Hephaestus had to work the whole night through to mend the broken chariot so Helios could drive it again the next day, because the sun has to come up every day, huh? Helios grieved over his lost son, and he never again allowed anyone to drive his chariot except for Apollo, the god of light, as he could handle it. So there we see some of the constellations in the stars, and we see Phaethon falling to his death, the horses being drawn back to their stables as Zeus hurls his thunderbolt to end the destruction to earth and save us. So, lots of different stories, but that's how they would explain the sun rising and setting each day. It would be Helios driving his chariot up until the sun was directly overhead at 12 noon, and then it starts coming down again. And that was the horses racing for home. Okay, let's see what is mentioned in some of these other books. The Weird But True book, about them, we have Pandora. We talk about Zeus punishing Prometheus, but he didn't stop there. He wanted to punish the people too. So we said, why is she weird? She was crafted out of clay, says Hephaestus made her. Unboxed. That's when she's Zeus, knowing how curious Pandora was, told her to never ever open the box. See, in this story it is a box. Pandora, she couldn't resist. The one thing that stayed in the box was hope. Some people believe that hope inside of the box symbolized keeping a glimmer of optimism when everything else seemed so bleak and sad. Okay. Let's see if there's Pandora said to have eyes made from sapphires and lips made from red rubies. We talked about the fates and the web of life. They controlled the lives of mortals from birth to death. We read about that in the very beginning. And cutting the thread. Power greater than Zeus, even. And then we have a marker for well, you may remember Hercules, or Heracles, as he was called by the Greeks. And one of the tasks that he performed was getting the golden apples of Hesperides, we said, and on his trek to do that, he sought advice from Prometheus, you may remember from last time, who suggested that he ask Atlas for help. And because Prometheus helped him, he was the one who came along and cut Prometheus's chains. He did not have to have his liver eaten out again every single night and grown back, thanks to Heracles. Odysseus was another group of tasks and jobs he had to do to get home. But that was what Heracles did to help Prometheus and free him. Let's see if Helios, the sun god, is in here. I didn't check on that one first. I think he was just a brief mention. Yeah, he was nothing big in this one. And Prometheus, we already know about what he did. 68 to 69 says, okay, why he's weird. He made mortals out of clay and water, just like Pandora. He wanted to help the humans and defied Zeus to do it. And there's a picture of an eagle shouting, more liver, because he was the one that would come down and eat his liver every night. There's a gilded statue of Prometheus at New York City's Rockefeller Center that looks like that. So that's supposed to be Prometheus. One of the most anticipated events of the Olympic Games, when the games are held, the torch relay, in which people pass the famous Olympic torch from place to place until it reaches the host city. And we can thank Prometheus for this tradition, as the torch's flame is meant to represent the fire he gave to humans. Prometheus is also thought to have been integral to inspiring the relay race itself, as it's a throwback to ancient Greece, when runners would participate in races known as lapidodromia. In the race, which celebrated gods, including Prometheus, a runner held a torch in their hand and passed it on to the next runner. The first team to reach the finish line with the torch still lit won. That must have been some hot competition, it says. Okay, so that's Prometheus. And let's check in our Greek mythology book. Let's see if anybody... Don't think any of these people are up in the stars, but let's double check on that. Helios 106 to 111. So maybe I'm wrong. Huh. Yeah, there's Helios. Don't know what his constellation looks like, but we read about life-giving sun. In Greek mythology, humans appear at one point with no discussion of how they were created. But in later Roman myths, especially by Ovid, Prometheus creates humans. Today we know the sun was crucial to the creation of all life on that earth. For that reason, Helios was woven into the story of humanity. But the ancients may well have seen no connection between the sun and life on earth. That's what it says. So there is Prometheus and Helios fashioning humans out of clay. But the idea of creating mortals in their own image delighted the gods, and more of them added what they could, trying to make them like themselves. And Pandora or Prometheus? Let's see if either of them are in here. Pandora is not. I don't think Prometheus. He gets a mention on page 109 to 110. Let's see. No, that's the page we just read. So, that's it for those books. Let's take a look at our packet. So, we have on the first sheet a list of sites you can go to, the online quiz site. You can do a crossword puzzle about Prometheus, Pandora, and a bunch of the gods, a little bit bigger and harder one. But then I'm pretty sure I gave you the answer sheet too, in case you get really stuck. And of course there is a word search. This one is about Pandora's box and some of the things she unleashed. It is a myth. She was celebrating a wedding to Prometheus. She let out evil. Humans were first called mudmen when they were first made out of the clay. And that is because Prometheus gave us fire from the gods. Zeus was the king of the gods, we know, who made Pandora. Prometheus was her husband. Prometheus gave us fire. Hope was the one thing that she didn't let escape from the box. And of course, Pandora, her name herself. So that is the word search. And then there's kids' video site you can watch about Pandora, and here is a poem to read about Pandora. According to old Greek legends, there once was a time when there were no women in the world, there were only men. That is until the mighty Zeus went to see Hephaestus one day and ordered him to make a woman out of clay. They named the woman Pandora and breathed her full of life, then gave her a young man named Prometheus as his wife. But Zeus was not really being nice. He had a wicked plan. His enemy Prometheus was the brother of a young man. Zeus gave him a box with a key. Then he sternly decreed that they must never look inside. The young couple agreed. Now Zeus thought Prometheus, despite this conversation, would be unable to withstand the terrible temptation. In fact, it was Pandora who gave in to curiosity. She quietly kept as her husband slept, and from him took the key. The box held many nasty things unknown to Pandora, and all of them could fly, which was discovered to her horror. She unlocked and opened the box, and the first to escape was rage, followed by pain, then jealousy, disappointment, greed, and old age. Continued on the next sheet here. Out flew measles, mumps, rubella, bubonic plague, chicken pox, leprosy, hepatitis B, all escaped from Pandora's box. Pandora was shocked and appalled. What on earth had she done? Soon all of the things had escaped. All that is, except one. As she peered into the box, she slowly became aware a little thing called hope was still trapped in there. Pandora sighed and let it go. She knew if there was hope, then no matter what else happened, the human race could cope. So, a little poem about Pandora. And then there is a play that you can put on. Might have to have each person be a couple different parts if you don't have that many people, but you can act out Pandora's box. And after the play, we have a National Geographic online site you can go to about Greeking out. Take another quiz online about Helios and his son, then you can check your answers. Make your own Pandora's box, which we'll talk about in just a second. And lastly, there was a coloring sheet for Phaethon driving the chariots before he crashed. Okay, so let's take a look at making your own box. Now this, of course, is open to a lot of personal interpretation. You can decorate your box however you want. They recommended using a shoebox, and they talked about painting the box. I didn't want to deal with paint and having to put on maybe a couple different layers. I'm just getting my directions here. So I just covered it in paper. And they said use a bright color, something that would give you hope, a warm, hopeful color. So I thought kind of this pale green was a nice bright color, and you decorate it and make it look tempting to someone, but then of course you have the note, do not open. So that was the outside, and then on the inside you're supposed to make it an evil color, a color that symbolized evil, and I used tissue paper to cover the inside and used red, as you can see. And then you're supposed to be cutting out things to put in to represent some of the evil that was left in the world as a result of this box opening. And on the very bottom, you were supposed to put hopeful pictures. So starting with the bottom, I have some flowers blooming. That's always a good hopeful thing. And a little baby, little child. And then I have some evil things. You're supposed to glue them around on the side. Sickness and anger. There's someone blowing their nose. They're sick. Despair. He's holding his head. And I forget what the other one was. Oh, people eating too much. So those are some of the pictures I put in mine. And then you were supposed to go and find some objects to put in. Like maybe a TV remote control would symbolize laziness because you don't want to get up and turn off the TV. Or whatever you could come up with, an unhealthy, you could put some junk food in, and that would be like a gluttony symbolizing eating too much, bad things for you. Things like that. So you could put in some of those things with evil items, and then you take that all out and you're left with the pictures of hope on the bottom. And that is your Pandora's box. So hopefully you can gather up some good things like that around your house. And then if you like your box when you're all done, you can certainly use it for something else as well. It doesn't have to be just for your Greek myth. So you can decorate a nice box and have it be your Pandora's box that nobody else is supposed to go in. It's your secret stuff in there. So that's what we have for this week's Greek Myth Mania. I hope you enjoyed watching and learning more about some of those myths and We've gotten off the gods and the heroes and are just going back and reviewing some of the myths that we missed. And I thank you for watching today. Remember, Shaler North Hills Library is open 6 days a week. So just check the website for the hours and come in and see us. We were happy to be there for you. And we are happy to help you get whatever you want. Or if you just want to browse, sometimes that's the best way to come in and get stuff. Or if you prefer us to pick stuff for you and pick it up at our pickup window, we can still do that, of course, as well. So, thanks again for watching. This has been Miss Kathy, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.